COVID has changed our day-to-day lives in quite a lot of ways, of course, but could it also mark the beginning of the end for cash? Futurist Mal Fletcher believes that coins and notes may be at risk and says this would be no good thing. So Mal joins me now. Thank you for coming on to talk about this. It's quite intriguing, really, isn't it?
It is, Adam. Good afternoon. Yeah, it is. I mean, we've been moving toward a digital economy well before the pandemic. In 2016, for example, just 34% of payments in the UK were made in cash. That's a big switch from a few years ago. But I believe that if we switch completely to cashless, there are groups of people who'd lose out. Elderly people, for example, often have problems with numeracy related to mental decline. They find it a lot easier to deal with money they can see and feel. Poorer people would lose out if we went completely cashless. 1.5 million people in the UK, Adam, have no bank account. And many poor people who do have a bank account have no easy access to the internet. So where do all the technology have-nots go for their money? And that's part of the reason why even in Sweden, where the government wants to go cashless within a few years, a healthy percentage of people want access to cash to remain a basic human right.
Of course, everything's got a flip side, so there are some benefits, I suppose. You've got lower crime rates, less money laundering, less time and costs associating with handling with money and storing it, easier currency exchange. So, I mean, there's a flip side to it as well. But how much do you think that cash really is at risk as a result of the pandemic right now?
Well, it comes down to habits, doesn't it? By the way, I'd have to challenge those statements about criminality, because you haven't factored in things like hacking and phishing with a PH and scamming websites, all of which are based in digital money, and the problems, too, of cyber currencies. But look, I would cite things like data outages as a major problem. In March of this year, 4 of our biggest phone service providers went down for 5 hours. Many of our listeners will remember that, and millions of people couldn't access their accounts. There's data breaches. Whenever you make a cashless payment, information about you becomes available to the business in question, if not to others who might use it in less desirable ways. And there's the problem of ID theft. 190,000 cases of ID fraud were reported in the UK just 2 years ago. So a thief can steal my cash, Adam, without gaining any access to personal information. But that's not true of digital payments. So, you know, there's factors on both sides. I'm not advocating we abandon cashless, even if we could. I'm a futurist. I'm just saying that we should have both, accommodating both in a healthy economy that's fair to everyone.
I also, thinking about it kind of deeper, I mean, if hackers drain your bank account if there is no cash, or, technical issues and stuff, you'll have no alternative source of money.
That's exactly right. And there's a question, too, of what comes next. We've moved very quickly, really, from cash to cards to app-driven payments in a couple of decades. What does the next payment option look like? If we look at China, which is pushing very hard at the moment to become one of the first nations in the world to go completely cashless, its number one payments app says that it aims to use very shortly fingerprints, facial recognition, and other forms of biometric information within its system. They're even looking at a thing called Smile to Pay, which allows you to take a selfie as a means of authenticating a bank account. Now, that sounds sexy, but it leaves the door wide open for invasive governments and businesses to misuse what I think is the most personal data of all.
Do you think then, COVID aside, that society should be using cash more?
I do. I think it's a good idea to use cash just because of its convenience. I use it all the time for its convenience. But I try to keep cash in my wallet. If I'm traveling, I keep cash in my passport. One, because I know what it does to my debt levels if I don't have something physical around. There's been a number of studies internationally now that show that people find it a lot easier to spend too much if all they're using is cashless systems, because there's no weight associated with it. There's no substantiality to the money. And so digital debt is another area. I think we should be using both and keeping cash on hand for the times when we need it. And I also just like to spend cash now and again to remind myself of the benefits of doing it.
It's difficult, really, isn't it? Because, with COVID here, a lot of people, I was only having this conversation with Kat Allman, who's on before me, that, because we wanted to be safe, because we don't want to touch pound coins or even notes that may have been touched by somebody else who might have had the virus, it's kind of been very easy to forget about cash and just go straight to your cards that you can tap and walk away. Because I even said the only cash I use these days is a pound coin to get a trolley.
If you can get one.
Well, there.
Yeah, look, you're absolutely right. You've touched on something very important. If we're going to retain cash and coins, we have to trust them when it comes to our health. And so many people are asking what you're asking, can cash or coins make you sick? And the answer, according to experts, is both yes and no. I was reading some research just yesterday by the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Safety and Security in the US, a major health research institute worldwide. And one of its leading scholars and doctors said this, that anything that can be on your hand can be on your money. But the fact that notes and coins carry germs doesn't necessarily mean those germs will make you sick when you encounter them on money. For example, unless you handle cash, he was saying, and then you almost immediately put your hands in your mouth, you're unlikely to catch, say, a cold or flu from cash. And of course, there's a big difference between the flu and COVID-19. We know that.
Yeah.
But coronavirus, like the flu, is spread through droplets more than surfaces. And you can clean money. That's the other thing people forget. Polymer banknotes, like the ones we use now.
Yeah, the new ones,
made of plastic. Yeah, they can be washed using vinegar and salt. They can be washed in soapy water or using antibacterial spray.
Yeah.
Coins are even easier to clean. You just take warm water, dishwashing detergents, and a toothbrush.
Well, I've got some notes that before COVID went straight through the washing machine a few times while in my back pocket. So, yeah, they certainly survived that. Lastly, then, are there other significant social changes that you think we might see in a post-COVID world?
Yeah, there's a lot. I think we're going to, for example, we're going to see big changes in education. We already have. Not only the logistics of education, I think we'll see staggered class times in schools happening for a while after vaccines are on the scene, because the emotional response takes a while to catch up with the technological response. People need time to start feeling safe and secure again. But also the content of education. A lot more classes will continue to be blended offline and online. And I think this wonderful idea of training on the job, being paid to do an accredited university course in somewhere like the Dyson Institute, if you're an engineer, that's going to be very attractive to many young people who want to avoid the expensive, usual university experience.
Of course. And there's all the other things that follow as well, with probably people not having to go to an office even post-COVID. Working from home's become a massive thing, and there's a lot of people that have said, you know what, I actually prefer this. And of course, if businesses are able to cut costs with, premises, not having to pay rent and all that kind of stuff, I mean, it's going to be a very, very different world next year.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it'll take a while for some of the changes to settle in. I mean, with home working, I think it's now something like 30-something% of Brits say if they can, they want to continue working at least part of their time at home. I think that offices will change, though. I think they will change because they have to become more whole-of-life experiences. People don't want to go and just sit in a cubicle, mechanically working as they once did. They want to have more of a sort of whole-of-life experience where they can get decent food, they can get exercise during the day, even if they have to come to the office to collaborate with colleagues.
Absolutely. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure and a fascinating insight as well to talk about this today. Futurist Mal Fletcher, thank you so much for coming on the show this afternoon, and I'm sure we'll catch up again in the future.